Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the Footy with Fletch podcast. Today I am joined by Dale Amos, who is the former Geelong VFL coach and he's also an assistant coach at Carlton and Geelong. Thank you for joining me today, Dale. How are you?
I'm going well, Fletch. It's a pleasure to be here and chatting about footy.
It is going to be great to talk to you today. You've had some great experience in the football industry. How did you sort of first get involved in football?
I guess early days, like most kids, for me, it was, I grew up in a small country town called St Arnaud, which if you drive from Melbourne to Mildura is about halfway, 3,000 people, small community. And to be honest, footy was part of the culture there. It's part of the environment. So for me, it was, we didn't get to play. Under 14s was the first age group I could actually start to play sort of competitive footy. But the introduction was more probably just at school, kicking with my mates at lunchtime. And we made up our own games and played as often as I could in the backyard with my brothers. And, that was probably where it started. But, in a small community, it was, a pivotal part of probably my upbringing.
Like you mentioned, football is such an important part in community and country Victoria. You started out playing in St Arnaud and then you moved on to play with St Kilda's VFL side. And then you played at South Barwon, playing at 3 different clubs. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I guess they were all incredibly different because St Arnaud was where I grew up, a real regional sort of community feel in terms of country footy. Then I was lucky enough to move to Geelong and I played some footy at South Barwon and it was a significant step for me moving from, a league like the North Central to then going to the GFL, which was incredibly strong when I first moved down and has continued to be so. And then obviously another step up again to play as part of the VFL program at St Kilda. So, look, I really enjoyed the challenges. There was some, it certainly wasn't seamless and there was some difficulties along the way, times when I probably doubted whether I was good enough, both at GFL level and certainly at St Kilda as well. But I thoroughly enjoyed the challenge, I guess, and the chance to be able to learn and play at the highest level that I could.
You had a great time at South Barwon. You played 216 games. You were the captain coach of 3 premierships and you also received 2 Best and Fairest awards. It must be amazing to go back and reflect on your time at South Barwon.
Yeah, I feel incredibly lucky to have been where I was. I guess my introduction there, was not a strong one. We were quite poor when I first started. I think we had 2 wins and 2 draws in my first year, and the club was in enormous stress financially. And a few former players stood up and I guess took control. Shane Cawthon and Ian Tompkins, a couple of former champions, took over coaching roles and we were back playing in a grand final within a couple of years. But I guess my overwhelming memories of that time were there was a group of good mates who played a lot of footy together and built that was the foundation for success. I think local footy in particular should be about that as often as it possibly can be. And I was really privileged to be able to play and be involved in 4 flags for that period of time. But it was extra special because I got to do it with my mates. So, it was a great time. Very, was a successful era and has continued to be at South Barwon for some time after I left.
You did have a great career there. You were a coach of the Geelong Vfl Team from 2009 to 2011, so you were sort of at the club during their premiership success. What was that like to be a part of the Geelong Vfl Team during that time?
Oh, it was incredible. I love the experience of being able to be involved with the VFL. I think when you work, Geelong was standalone. An element of the pressure for winning kind of wasn't there, maybe the same as what it was for the other teams. And I feel like that actually allowed me to be able to coach really well. So I really enjoyed that, working with the young talent at the club. And there was a big emphasis on making sure we develop players to be able to be part of the AFL system. I think there's no doubt that you can do both, that you can develop young talent, afford them opportunities, be patient with them, but also create success. And that happened the following year in 2012, which was kind of a culmination, I guess, of that work that had been done to build a squad up. But being at Geelong was incredible at that time. I walked in at the end of 2008, going into the 2009 season, and I still remember Gary Ablett and Jimmy Bartell introducing themselves and thinking, look, I'm pretty sure I know who you guys are. It was a side that was laden with superstars, incredible leadership, a really solid foundation that had been built over a number of years before that. So, to step in and be a part of success straight away, I felt really privileged to be a part of that.
It is a great club in the VFL and the AFL, and the VFL is a great competition as well. Your time as an assistant coach at the Cats was from 2012 to 2015. What was that like for you, and what were some of the differences between coaching VFL and being an assistant coach in the AFL?
Yeah, look, I got to see. I was very privileged to work with Mark Thompson as head coach, and then with Chris Scott. So both had their different styles, different strengths and weaknesses, I think. But again, when I first walked in, Bomber Thompson's the head coach. Nigel Lappin had just started, who's gone on to be an incredibly successful assistant coach in the AFL system. Brendan McCartney, Brenton Sanderson, and Kenny Hinkley were the assistant coaches. So in terms of walking into an environment, it was pretty phenomenal to have that sort of support around, and the caliber of coaches that were there at the time. So look, it was I guess the transition. I did a 12-month as an assistant, did 12 months where I was the opposition analyst, which was an incredibly great learning experience for me. It gave me a chance to explore my coaching, I think, and look at other teams and how they do things, study the game, learn about the game. And that was a really key probably year for me in terms of my learning. I really missed working with the players because I didn't have quite as much contact with them through that period. But in terms of as a learning year, it was incredibly beneficial for me in terms of the long term. Bomber Thompson was phenomenal as a coach, his ability and his relationships, particularly with those core players. I talked about Bartell and Ablett, and it was Johnson and Mooney, and there was a whole group of them that he'd brought through. They drafted them in, and that he'd brought through. He had a great relationship. Was a terrific game day coach, the best game day coach I've seen in my time. Great ability to be able to see the game, understand what was happening in the game, and I think particularly to be able to communicate exactly what he needed to happen. And then Chris Scott came in, I think, at a great time, changed some things, really empowered the older players to have some ownership over their program and what that looked like, changed defensively the way we played through that period. And it was a great time. Again, Chris is a terrific communicator and has done a wonderful job at the footy club, and still continues to do so.
They are two fantastic coaches of the Geelong Football Club, and it's great that you've been able to work with these two knowledgeable football coaches. What would be some of the highlights of your time at Geelong?
I mean, clearly the premierships, in 09 and 11, I was lucky enough to be the runner on grand final day in 2009, which was a bit of a thrill, an unbelievable game. That one against St Kilda, one that really went down to the wire. The infamous Scarlett Tablet toe poke was part of that game. It was wet. It was incredibly physical and a really tight game all day that the Cats were good enough to be able to win in the end. 2011, probably if I go back to 2009, there was a game I remember early in that season where St Kilda and Geelong were both undefeated. I think both sides were 12-0. There was a game at now Marvel Stadium, with about 60,000 people in the attendance, and it was a game where Michael Gardner took a mark with about 30 seconds to go to win the game. That was a highlight. I think probably as loud a crowd as I've been involved in. The roof was shut, and 60,000 people at Marvel was a sight to behold. And then 2011, I remember probably the first time the Cats beat Collingwood who were probably the benchmark team. They'd won the premiership the year before, and had the wood over Geelong for a period of time. There was a home and away game, and then the last game of the home and away as well, where the Cats were able to beat the Pies, and I think there was a lot of self-belief built off that. But particularly the first time they met in the home and away season, built an enormous amount of belief to lead them into the finals, and then obviously the grand final success. So those obviously stand out. Being such a successful era, those premiership games were incredible memories.
You were incredible to be involved in premierships as an assistant coach. What do you think is one of the most important things about being a coach of football? What do you think are some of the key takeaways from your time?
Look, I guess I knew it, and probably it was reinforced when I was at the Cats. I think the ability to be able to build relationships and connect with your people becomes really critical. I think, having investment in people beyond what they can do for you is critical in being able to build that. And I've probably taken that through my coaching career. I guess I became really good at asking questions and listening a lot, particularly because I'd come from local footy. I guess that maybe assisted with that. But it's one of the things that probably is underdone, I think, that, it's okay, and it's actually a great skill to be able to ask questions and try and learn from the people around you. I was fortunate I had great people around me, and I knew that I did at the time. But that ability to be able to continue to read and listen and learn and try and upskill yourself, I think is really important. And probably the other one, and this maybe happened when Chris Scott came in, there was a period where we scrapped every training drill we'd done before and decided that we'd start again and built from the ground up. And I think maybe asking those questions and challenging the status quo and not just doing things because they'd been done that way before is really important lesson as well that I've carried through. So again, being able to challenge why you're doing things. If there's a good reason and you can justify why, I think that's really important. If you can't, then asking the question and working out how maybe we can do it better is critical in all facets of coaching as well.
They are some great messages and some great lessons that you have learnt. In your time at Geelong, who would have been some of the players that you would have had the closest relationships with?
Yeah, well, look, I coached the backline through most of my time. So, Matthew Scarlett, Corey Enright, Andrew Mackey are three that stand out. Probably in my last couple of years, I did a stack of work with Mark Blitzarves and Harry Taylor. Became pretty close with both of those guys. Particularly with Blitz, who I think was playing as a back at the time and developing his craft. He really, one of the things that stands out about him is, a bit of what I just spoke about. I guess he was always inquisitive, always wanted to learn and ask questions, and the work ethic that he developed through he and Harry was great to watch. I think, basically at the end of every training session, whether it be pre-season or in-season, those guys would go at it in terms of working on their marking craft and their contested work religiously, after every single training session. And there's no surprise that they had the careers they did. And now Mark in particular has gone on to develop into the player that he has. So, they were the guys that I spent a lot of time with. I became very close with Jimmy Bartell, and continue to be in great mates with Jimmy today. So, great times. It was really, incredible time to be at the footy club with such a successful era and a real privilege to be a part of it.
Like you said, it must have been a great privilege for you. You were an assistant coach at the Carlton Football Club from 2015 to 2021. What was your time at Carlton like?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it was as amazing as Geelong was. I think probably for me as a coach, I learned significantly more in my time at Carlton. I think being in an environment, which I went into knowing that we were going to have to change a few things, and there was some habits and behaviours and structural things that we were going to have to shift. I learned a lot about what it looked like. I think when you're in a good environment, you can take for granted exactly what it is that makes it so strong and so good. But when you in an environment that needs some work done, you tend to be able to identify things really far more easily. So Brendan Bolton was great for me with that. I learned a lot in terms of the discipline and the structure that he implemented, I think early days at Carlton, which are critical to where they are now. But yeah, look, I really enjoyed it. I went from coaching quite an old group at Geelong, had a lot of experienced players and probably coached them a little bit differently, to then going into quite a young group a developing group, and I formed some great relationships and built some great connections off the back of that. Feeling like, particularly say for someone like a Jacob Wiedering, who my first year was his first year, to feel like we sort of started on a journey together was really phenomenal. So it was quite contrasting to Geelong, but in terms of learning and developing my coaching and growing as a person, I learned significantly more in my time at Carlton than maybe even at Geelong.
You mentioned your time with Jacob Wiedering, and that is great that you both started your time at the Carlton Football Club together. It's sort of well known within the AFL industry that you've got a close relationship with Sam Doherty, and you did an interview with the Herald Sun last week. You would have been watching the game last Thursday night. And what was your reaction when Sam kicked that goal? It was absolutely inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those sort of hair on the back of the neck kind of moments, I think, and it's not being a Carlton person or even a footy person. I think when you have an understanding of what Sam's been through and his battles, particularly in recent history, but they extend well beyond that. To see someone be able to fight through that type of adversity and come out the other side, and then to be in a moment like that where you're in front of a big crowd at the MCG, and a moment like that happens, it's very inspiring. So we became incredibly close in our time at Carlton, and built a great connection, one out of respect, I think, for each other, and became great mates. I probably endured a little bit of it with him. I saw him through parts of his chemo where he looked incredibly sick and frail, and you could see he was doing it, really tough. So I couldn't have imagined he would possibly be available to play round one. So for him to be able to go from where he was to be available to be able to play, and then obviously play as well as he did and have that moment in a win, it was a pretty special moment, and something I know that he'll remember for the rest of his life.
He is a very special person, and like you mentioned, he's very resilient. You also worked with David Tigie at Carlton. What was it like to work with Tigie as an assistant coach, but then under him as a senior coach?
Yeah, the one thing I remember probably as strongly as anything about Tigie is he went from being an assistant coach to a senior coach, and he sat at exactly the same desk. He was no different when he became the senior coach to what he was as an assistant, which is, testament to him. I think his character, his values, who he is as a person didn't change. He was exactly the same person. And the fact that we'd work side by side and then he became my boss didn't change anything. In fact, we probably became closer off the back of it. So, I think he took over at a great time for the footy club. He was appointed in a great time and then endured a really tough 2 years. I think the hub experience was unique, to say the least, and unique for all coaches, let alone a first-time coach. I think if you look across the industry, the toll it took probably on the young coaches in the competition was significant because it was so unique. And then, in his second year, a review got launched partway through his first, second year of coaching. So I think he probably didn't quite get the time he deserved. And, hopefully for me, he gets an opportunity to go back. I know he's at Richmond now and doing a great job there. I'd love to see him, re-establish himself as an assistant and hopefully get another opportunity to be a senior coach again someday.
It would be great to see him be a senior coach again. You mentioned the internal review at the Carlton Football Club last year. What was it like within the football club to deal with the constant media discussions about the internal review throughout last season? Yeah,
look, it's probably the first time I've really experienced that. As someone who's come from local footy and coached, certainly don't have a reputation within the competition, so people don't necessarily know who you are. But seeing, there was a moment where I saw all the assistant coaches with big crosses across their name, sitting with my kids watching the news, which was probably the first time it really hit home. I guess for myself, I knew there was an element that I could control, but there was also a huge part of it that I couldn't. So I guess I put most of my energy into the stuff that I could. The probably flow on of your family and your friends and the pressure that they feel off the back of the scrutiny is probably something you can't really control, and something that is a little bit harder, particularly, like I said, for my kids who, were getting questions at school and finding that a little bit difficult. But probably the overwhelming thing was the people in the footy department, and the bond that they built through that period is incredibly strong. I think we became reliant on each other. I think everybody, did a great job at checking in on people's well-being and making sure they were doing okay. I think it was a great lesson in that we probably should do more of that in general, because, particularly from an AFL point of view, it's a really tough industry that has a ruthless element to it that, does take a toll on people. It demands a lot, and you have to commit a lot to be involved in the industry itself. So, I guess I feel grateful that I was able to build such strong bonds with so many people within the footy department. And that was maybe through a bit of adversity and the pressure that was external, but internal. That was something that I'll be, forever grateful that I got a chance to be able to experience.
It would have been a challenging time for you, but moving on, what are some of the week-to-week duties of an assistant coach? How do you prepare before a match?
Yeah, look, it is. Maybe I had no idea before I went in. I certainly did when I was coaching local footy, I guess, have an understanding of the enormity of the role. Probably the best way to describe being an assistant coach is you spend, your day is spent either in meetings, at training, or spending time with people, with players and with other coaches. And the majority of your actual work, getting presentations ready, watching opposition, preparing for upcoming games, reviewing games, you do all of that stuff at home. So you do invest a lot of hours, and I'd be surprised if there's many assistant coaches out there working less than sort of 70 or 80 hours a week. That's just kind of what it demands. So in terms of a weekly timeline, you kind of play, whatever day it is. Say you play on a Saturday, majority of your Sunday is spent reviewing the game. Probably take you upward between 6 and 7 hours to be able to review and get things ready for the following day. Monday would be your review day, where as coaches you get together and you're trying to plan how you're going to communicate to your players, both in a team aspect and also individual and line. That would be a long day of meetings, light training. Tuesday you would train properly, and then you'd probably do your line meetings, continuing individual reviews. Wednesdays are, typically would be an assistant coach's day off, which is doing all your opposition work from home, ready for the upcoming week. Thursday, again, a big day training and meetings, getting ready for the following game. You'd spend time at night getting ready for your meetings the following day, which would be your captain's run. Typically you have your training in the morning, run your meetings, have your final meetings, and probably the best part of your day, but the most relaxed part of your week, I guess, is once that captain's run meeting and training is done. Typically around sort of 2-3 o'clock on a Friday on a Saturday game is your time to be able to switch off a little bit before you go around again and start again on the Saturday when you play. So, look, great fun. I loved all of what it was, but yeah, it does it does require a fair amount of investment, and it's certainly not for the faint of heart. You have to be, love it and certainly be invested in it to make it successful.
It sounds like you have had a great time in your role as an assistant coach. What would be one of the funniest moments in your time in the coach's box during your career?
Look, I remember a time when we were at Carlton and we were playing the Western Bulldogs, and I remember Brendan Bolton trying to work out who was on Robert Murphy. So he was asking who's on Murphy, and the response was coming back as Murphy, which was Mark Murphy. And the exchange went backwards and forwards 3 or 4 times, with the volume getting louder and louder, Bolts getting more and more frustrated, until someone actually said that Mark Murphy was playing on Robert Murphy, which was probably one of the ones that does stand out through my time. It's it's a pressure cooker environment that sometimes it explodes in an outpouring of emotion, but there certainly are moments of joy, I guess, where funny little comments are made or things happen that certainly break the tension and help the coaches in the box. That's for sure.
That would have been a really funny and interesting moment to be a part of. Now, in your post-AFL coaching days, you are now the head of football at Xavier College. What are some of the preparations for the upcoming season like for you?
I guess it's changed, Fletch. I think now I'm still coaching and helping out with the coaches, but it's a lot more managing a program. You know, the Xavier program has from 9 to 12 has 17 teams, so it's a lot of employing coaches, setting up more holistically the program to try and facilitate the learning for the players, for the coaches themselves, and trying to create a program that's going to give the students at the school the best chance to have the best experience they possibly can. So I think, principally we're doing the same thing as I was an assistant coach, but it's more the logistics and the management of a program. I'm enjoying that. I'm enjoying the challenge of that. But I'm also equally reminded why I love the coaching and the chance to be able to be out on the field and working through pre-season with the players and also with the coaches. I'm really enjoying as well. So yeah, it's a really pivotal, I guess, stage of their lives through that year 9 to 12, where hopefully through the footy program we can start to help to embed some really strong values and behaviours and give them some skills that are going to hold them in good stead through the rest of their life.
It must be a great role for you. And just finally, what do you think is something that not many people in the football industry know about you?
That's a good question, Fletcher. I guess probably the one, and I use this one a little bit, and it probably speaks to my sense of community. I spoke about growing up in St Arnaud and that sense of community. Probably what added to that was my dad was one of 15, so enormously big family. So 12 boys and 3 girls. So yeah, it's unique. It probably at the time I didn't think of it as any different as to what it was. I remember Christmases with my uncles dressed up as Santa and lots of cousins being around. I think at last count there's about 35 or 36 cousins and now grandchildren. So that sense of community and belonging to something probably stems a little bit from that family and the size of family, which was an important part of my upbringing. So I guess that's a little bit quirky, a little bit unique. There's not too many families out there, I don't think, with 15 brothers and sisters in their family. So that's maybe something that's a little bit different, a little bit unique to my upbringing, and certainly shaped a little bit of who I am today.
That is an interesting fact for people to learn about you. Thank you very much for joining me today, Dale. It's been great to talk to you.
Fletch, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
So there you have it, Dale Amos with me on the Footy with Fletch podcast.